Let us now go back and look at the same example with some new information. We had earlier calculated the diluted EPS, and what we had in the diluted EPS was that the numerator was 268,800 and the denominator was 100,000 plus 60,000, that was 160,000. So this was what we had earlier, and this diluted EPS came out to be approximately 1.7. Now, and obviously this is a dilution because our basic EPS was EPS which we had discussed earlier. This was $2.4 in this case. So there was a dilution that happened. Now I'll just probably change few parameters here. There were 600 bonds and each bond got converted into 100 shares. Now let me change this. Instead of 100 shares, let's say if they get converted into only 10 shares. So what will be the impact on the EPS now? So let's try and find out what will be the impact on the EPS. Because of this 600 bonds now being converted into 10 shares each, will there be any change in the numerator? There will be no change in the numerator. What about the denominator? How will this denominator change? The denominator will contain the original common stocks, that is 100,000, plus your 600 bonds multiplied by 10. The numerator is $268,800 divided by your denominator would be 106,000. So your EPS actually comes out to be $2.54. So here I have done that calculation already. So you can use this calculator to calculate this EPS. Now compare this with the basic EPS. Now you will find and note that this increases. So instead of dilution, it is actually an anti-dilutive security now. So the bond can be anti-dilutive as well. And if this is anti-dilutive, what you will do is you will just ignore that there were any convertible securities in this, and in the calculation of EPS you will not take these anti-dilutive securities. So you will not take this, and hence your numerator and denominator will essentially be equal to what we had in the basic EPS. So in this case you will find that your basic EPS was $2.4. Your diluted EPS will also come out to be the same thing. Reason being that there was only one convertible security, and that too is anti-dilutive. So your basic EPS must be equal to diluted EPS in this case. Like what we saw in the preferred shares, that there was a quick method to calculate whether they were anti-dilutive or dilutive shares, we will see that there's a similar kind of a method for the convertible debt as well. You may actually in fact guess the formula. There was the incremental impact on the numerator and the incremental impact on the denominator is taken into consideration. What is the incremental impact due to convertible debt in the numerator of the EPS? That is interest multiplied by 1 minus the tax rate. This is the incremental impact on the numerator. What about the denominator? The incremental impact is the additional shares that are issued because of conversions. So this is the incremental impact. So let's take both the cases which we had discussed earlier. One, we had the interest into 1 minus tax rate. Here interest was 600 bonds into 1000 was the par value and 8% was the interest, and we were also given that the tax rate was 40%. So this was 40%. So this was the numerator, okay, and this came out to be $28,800. Now the first case, the case which we are discussing is because of the additional number of shares. Now let's say this 600 bonds, the first case that we had was the dilutive one, and each bond got converted into 100 shares each. So what happened to the denominator? Total number of shares, common shares that will be issued will be 600 into 100, that is basically equal to 60,000. So let's calculate this numerator divided by denominator. In this case this will be $28,800 divided by 60,000. So this is less than $1.00, and we compare this with our basic EPS. What was our basic EPS earlier? This was $2.40. So since this is less than the basic EPS, in this case A, these 600 bonds when converted into 100 shares will behave like a dilutive securities. Now there was case B which we had discussed earlier. These 600 bonds had a flavor where each got converted into 10 shares. So the total number of common shares in this case would be 600 multiplied by 10. So this is 6000. Now what will be the numerator divided by the denominator in this case? This will be 28,800 divided by 6000. And if you do a rough calculation, you will find that this is greater than $4.00. So what happens here? The EPS, the incremental effect, is greater than the basic EPS. So this is greater than 4 is greater than 2.40. So what happens that if this is the scenario, these convertible securities will be anti-dilutive. So this is a shortcut or a short way to actually check whether your securities are dilutive or anti-dilutive.